Okay, so South Carolina's SEC tournament title run wasn't exactly a cakewalk, but I do believe that the struggles they endured will make them better in the long run.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Andrew Line, the host of this podcast, and you can find my written work, as always, over on Gamecock Digest on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both wherever you get your audio podcasts daily and also on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Dawn Staley and the South Carolina Gamecocks claimed their 8th SEC tournament title in program history on Saturday afternoon, defeating the number 2 seed LSU Tigers 79-72. Now, admittedly, how the Gamecocks got there, it wasn't always pretty. They definitely did not play perfect basketball, but I do believe that the Gamecocks will be better because of the mistakes and obstacles that they had to overcome in Greenville this past weekend. So while we're going to talk about a couple of the freshmen that showed up in a big way for South Carolina over the past couple days, and yes, we are going to talk about that skirmish that took place late in the game against LSU on Sunday. We are going to talk about sort of each game and how South Carolina got better in one area or another from one game to the next. So let's start off with the quarterfinal matchup that they played against Texas A&M this past Friday. Now, again, I don't think really any Gamecock fan coming into this game thought that there was a chance that Texas A&M was actually going to remain competitive here with South Carolina. And admittedly, they actually kind of did remain competitive because they only lost by 11 points. I also don't think that anyone thought that South Carolina was going to go out there on the floor and turn over the ball 24 times, which is exactly what they did in that matchup. Heading into that matchup, the Gamecocks' season average, I believe, was 13 in terms of turnovers per game. They had 10 alone in the first quarter and 5 in the second quarter. So obviously 15 in just the first 20 minutes of play. And Dawn Staley told the media flat out after the game that the Gamecocks, they did not rise up to the standard of basketball that's required really for this time of year. They did not play up to their standards, their level that they are accustomed to. And so ball security was certainly a concern coming out of that game because, again, Texas A&M, they're not a bad team. You know, they're a borderline NCAA tournament team. They're probably going to get in the tournament because of what they did against the Gamecocks, but wasn't going to be your biggest challenger. That wound up being your semifinal matchup when you took on the Tennessee Lady Volunteers. So after overcoming some self-inflicted mistakes in the quarterfinals against the Aggies, the Gamecocks in this one, they had to escape what was almost a disaster because for the first 15 minutes or so, it looked like that the Gamecocks were going to run away with this game. At one point, South Carolina had a 23-point lead in the second quarter. However, Tennessee would wind up mounting a ferocious comeback, which was, of course, spearheaded by future WNBA player Rickea Jackson, who has been phenomenal during her time up in Knoxville and certainly been a thorn in the side for South Carolina with all the battles that they have had against one another. Eventually, the Lady Volunteers actually were up by 2 points with less than a minute to go in the game. They even had a chance to ice the game late, but Volunteer guard Jules Spear would miss 2 free throws, and then MiLaysia Fulwiley would grab a rebound, run down the floor, got fouled. Tennessee had a foul to give, so South Carolina, they just put Raven Johnson over there on the sideline, had her throw to Kamilla Cardoso, who for whatever reason that we will never know was left wide open right around the 3-point line. And so she just got a free shot and she banked it in, and South Carolina wound up winning the game at the buzzer. It was quite unbelievable to see that play out the way that it did. I don't think anybody thought that it would get to that point. So the Gamecocks, again, they quite literally escaped what would have been a disaster if they had blown that 23-point lead completely and then wound up losing the game on top of that. Now, at the same time in this game, although South Carolina did blow a massive lead, they did only turn over the ball 9 times. So they were at least markedly better when it came to ball security. Tennessee, you just got to give them credit. 3 games into this season against South Carolina, they've proven at this point they're not going to back down from a fight. And again, we'll be talking about a fight, or at least, a scrum later on in the show. Now, that leads me into the grand finale, the SEC Finals against LSU. Now, in this game, it was all about South Carolina making timely plays and not losing their composure. The Gamecocks went down early in this game, 13-7 in the first quarter. That was with about, I believe, 4.5 minutes left in that period. The Gamecocks turned around and outscored the Tigers 11-2 to end the first quarter. So they wound up being up 15-18 10 minutes into this game. Then in the third quarter, at one point, they had a 13-point lead, and it looked like that South Carolina had a chance to really pull away here and pretty much slam the door shut on LSU, who obviously came to this game a good bit banged up, with a couple players not being able to play, and others were playing, but they were playing through injury. But the Tigers wound up fighting back in this game, and they wound up cutting the lead down to 1 with 4:36 left in the contest. However, again, South Carolina, they were unfazed. They wound up holding on to the lead, and they never relinquished it. Even when the skirmish broke out with 2:08 left in the game that saw Kamilla Cardoso get ejected for fighting, the entire bench outside Tahina Pow being told to go to the locker room because they left the bench area. In spite of all of that, very unusual circumstances, unique circumstances that this team's not used to, especially for how young it is in terms of being a collective unit, they did not let that mess with their psyche. They still went out there on the floor and took care of business against largely LSU's primary starting lineup, which I thought was extremely impressive for how everything went down in the final couple of minutes. And it is important to remember, some people might be sitting here saying, Andrew, you're going a little bit easy on them. Again, if Kamilla Cardoso just missed that last second shot against Tennessee, we would not be talking about this right now. I'm totally willing to admit that. But we also do have to remember, it's the first time that this specific group has gone through a tournament-like setting where they know that if they just lose one game, they're knocked out. It's a much different mentality than a regular season game is. And yes, Kamilla Cardoso has a lot of experience in those kind of games. So does Raven Johnson. But not experience as starters, being a couple of the players that this team looks to and says, we need you to step up in this game. We got to have you making plays, or else we might be in trouble. They haven't had that happen yet. The SEC tournament here that just took place last weekend was the first time that they went through that. And yes, they had their struggles. They do have to shore up a couple areas. But I would say that they learned a lot from this experience, and they will be better for this in the long run when the NCAA tournament begins in about a week and a half's time or so. Now, as I alluded to just a couple moments ago, there was definitely a fight that broke out late in the game between South Carolina and LSU, which unfortunately took away a lot of the headlines from this game. And I promise we're going to talk about other aspects of the game, but we do have to talk about this skirmish. And specifically, how should we feel about Kamilla Cardoso and what she did in that entire kerfuffle? We'll dive into all of that in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experience with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. The women's basketball team just went through their SEC tournament, and now it's the men's team's turn to go through their own SEC tournament. South Carolina will be playing on Thursday against the winner of the Arkansas-Vanderbilt game that will take place on Wednesday night, and you can get tickets for the South Carolina game and the Mississippi State LSU game, Session 2, as it's known, on Game Time. The cheapest upper bowl tickets right now are going for $7. The cheapest lower bowl tickets, $94. Pretty good for a Power 6 conference tournament. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to this Monday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen, wherever you get your audio podcasts daily, or your first watch on YouTube. Now, when it comes to team sports and the games that those teams play, obviously, we should never advocate for violence. But when looking at what happened between Kamilla Cardoso and LSU's Flau'jae Johnson, and really and truthfully a lot of the Tigers on Sunday afternoon, I don't think that Kamilla Cardoso should be overly criticized for what all happened. So we're going to break down a couple of components with what all played out here, both leading into this skirmish and then the skirmish itself. So let's start off with this. I'm not going to put it all on the officials, but I do think that the officials are responsible partly for this fight taking place. Because I got to admit, Kim Mulkey made a good point in her post-game presser, although she also said something else that was very eyebrow-raising that I'll talk about again in a few minutes. But she mentioned that leading up to Flau'jae Johnson's intentional foul of MiLaysia Fulwiley, trying to prevent her from basically getting an easy coast-to-coast layup that would have put South Carolina up 9 at that point in the game, only 2 fouls had been called in the entire fourth quarter, which at that point was almost 8 minutes. 1 foul on each team. So the referees were kind of basically just letting them play it out. And you might be wondering, well, Andrew, why would we be upset with that? You know, you should want the referees to let the teams play it out. Let them decide the game's outcome. And I would agree with that. But the thing was, these referees were very inconsistent with how they called this game. When you look at the third quarter, there were 11 fouls called between both teams. 6 for one team and 5 for the other. I don't remember which one had 6 and 5, but you get the point. Going from 11 fouls to 2 fouls in the fourth quarter, call it one way or another. If you're going to call it tight for the whole game. If you're going to let the teams just play it out themselves, then let them play it out throughout the entire game. You got to be consistent. That's all fans want. It's all the media wants. It's all that the coaches and players want. Sure, it's not always going to be perfect. Everybody knows that. But at least be consistent with how you're going to call the game. The referees were not consistent on Sunday afternoon, and because of that, I do believe that they deserve a bit of blame here for what happened. Now, let's talk about the incident with Kamilla Cardoso. Why did she do what she did, which was basically go up and shove Flau'jae Johnson to the floor? Now, for those of you who might not remember, if you somehow have not seen the clip of the entire skirmish yet, basically what happened was this. Flau'jae intentionally fouled MiLaysia Fulwiley. Then, as Flau'jae was walking back towards LSU's side of the floor, Bree Hall said something to her very quickly as she went on by her. Ashlyn Watkins also was either, just shouting at her or saying something really quickly to her as she was walking up. Flau'jae, apparently being frustrated at this point, basically gave a forearm shove to Ashlyn Watkins. Now, Watkins did not initiate the contact. It was all Flau'jae Johnson in that regard. And she got her right around her neck area when you look at the replay with her forearm. And obviously, even though I don't completely back what Bree and Ashlyn were doing, obviously, you poke the bear enough with somebody that might be a bit upset, eventually they're going to react, right? But that was uncalled for, either way you look at it. Now, what I think happened, this is just my opinion on what happened. I was not there in the arena, but from my vantage point, I think what happened was this. Kamilla did not see all the first couple of events. She did not see the first couple of interactions. But the first thing she did see was Flau'jae hitting Ashlyn Watkins up near her neck area. And we got to remember, by this point in the game, Cardoso already had her hair pulled by Angel Reese on one possession, had been smacked in the face by Angel Reese on a different possession that led to Reese getting a flagrant one foul. There had been a lot of physical play going on up to that point in the game. And again, in the fourth quarter up until that point, only one foul had been called on both teams. So the refs been letting them play how they want to that entire period. So I do think that had an effect on Kamilla Cardoso. I think that did sort of boil up inside of her a little bit as the game wore on. And then here's the other thing. Anyone that played team sports would understand or will understand what I'm about to say. There is a code when you are a part of a team and you have a teammate that gets, I don't want to say attacked necessarily in this situation because Flau'jae didn't necessarily attack Ashlyn Watkins, but when you have a teammate that gets shoved, something physical happens, you're going to stick up for your teammate. Now, I'm not advocating for doing what Kamilla Cardoso did, which is, again, just run up and basically just shove Flau'jae straight to the floor. Because obviously things can get a lot worse when that happens. All that does is compound the situation. Not advocating for that. But the whole point is you stick up for your teammates no matter what. Not saying that it should get to that point, but you always stick up for your teammates. And I think that Kamilla basically was just trying to stick up for her teammate. And yes, it did not look good on the replay and everything, but I think that her intentions overall were basically just to protect Ashlyn Watkins from what had just happened in her interaction with Flau'jae Johnson. The last thing I want to say real quickly is that Kamilla Cardoso showed remorse, okay? She posted an apology on X not long after the game and post-game ceremonies took place. And this is what Kamilla Cardoso said in her post. Quote, "I would like to extend my sincerest apologies for my actions during today's game. My behavior was not representative of who I am as a person or the South Carolina program, and I deeply regret any discomfort or inconvenience it may have caused. I take full responsibility for my actions and assure you that I am committed to conducting myself with the utmost respect and sportsmanship in the future." Now, whether or not you want to say that she got help putting that apology together, I don't think that really matters all that much. What matters is she made a public apology for the whole situation that unfolded. I think that is commendable, okay? And at the same time, listen, I don't want to try to paint Flau'jae Johnson like a total bad guy or bad girl here in this case, however you want to put it. But Flau'jae did apologize to Dawn Staley after the game was over. So credit to her for also owning up to anything that she might have done that caused that entire thing to just go from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. Now, the same can't quite be said for Kim Mulkey and what she said in her post-game presser, which started out, objectively speaking, pretty reasonable in terms of everything that she was laying out from her perspective on what all happened. But then Kim Mulkey said this at the tail end of her answer. Take a listen to what she had to say here.
It's ugly. It's not good. No one wants to be a part of that. No one wants to see that ugliness. But I can tell you this. I wish she would have pushed Angel Reese. Don't push a kid. You 6'8", don't push somebody that little. That was uncalled for, in my opinion. Let those two girls that were jawing, let them go at it.
I could talk for several more minutes on what Kim Mulkey said right there, but to just put it bluntly, that was wrong. You're the head coach of a major women's college basketball program. You're supposed to be the adult in the room. You don't say something like that. That was an underlying threat, was what that was. For a college basketball, that you should never say that. Okay? You just shouldn't. And then she tried to use Flage, I guess, lack of size, which, by the way, that was a bit of a backhand right there too. Like, the fact that she tried to mask all of that over what her true intent was for saying that, she did not have to sneak that in there at the very end. She had a lot of time during that answer to think long and hard about, is this a good thing to say? And yet she said it anyways. And that's quite disappointing, to be honest. Now, I will admit, it's unknown whether or not she saw the replay of what all happened before she went up to that microphone and spoke to the media after the game. So we do have to be fair about that. But still, that's not a good look for Kim Mulkey. And there's been plenty of people outside of South Carolina that have said the same exact thing on social media since that message has spread like wildfire all over the place once all this took place. So, bottom line with Kamilla Cardoso, again, Pete Iacobelli for the Associated Press made a great point in Dawn's postgame presser. It's almost like when you're a parent, you're not happy with your kid's action itself, but your kid was defending their sibling, or in this case, Cardoso was defending a teammate. And that part has got to make you feel good about how connected your team is. And I think that's the perfect way to sum up everything that happened. I don't think this is going to blow over. Obviously, Kim Mulkey's comments don't help trying to cool tensions, but I think the players did a good job here, taking ownership, taking responsibility. Dawn Staley did as well. Hopefully, this will be the end of that, and we won't see something like this happen again. Hopefully. But of course, if South Carolina and LSU meet up again in the NCAA Tournament, who knows? I can guarantee you one thing, ESPN will be running that clip all over the place to try and generate interest for that matchup. No doubt about that. Now, again, I said earlier, I don't want to just talk about the fight this whole show or the latter bit of this show. I do want to talk about some of the individual performances from some of the other Gamecocks on this team, and a couple of freshmen in particular who really showed up big time this past weekend. We'll discuss those two freshmen in a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team both faster and for free. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which is a big reason why 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, so why not join them today? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. Tessa Johnson and MiLaysia Fulwiley, they showed something for South Carolina's women's basketball team in the SEC tournament, and that is a good sign for the Gamecocks moving forward. Let's start off with MiLaysia Fulwiley, who arguably was the biggest reason why South Carolina defeated the LSU Tigers on Sunday afternoon. As a matter of fact, Kim Mulkey, talk about backhanded compliments earlier. She gave one about MiLaysia Fulwiley, saying that she was basically the one player that hurt LSU on Sunday. And she definitely was not wrong in that regard. Fulwiley scored 24 points against LSU, which led the entire team. 4 of those 5 shots that she hit were from behind the three-point line. By far, her most efficient three-point outing of the season. And to top it all off, Fulwiley played fantastic defense. Now, look, I think we all can agree at this point, when Fulwiley is on the defensive end, we all know at this point, Fulwiley is going to get 1 or 2 fouls a game that make you sit there and go, you did not have to do that. You were in a good spot, and you just got too aggressive there. At this point, you just got to take that. That's just going to come with Fulwiley and her mindset and the way that she plays on the floor as a true freshman. But she and Raven Johnson, for that matter, both did a great job of really pressuring Haley Van Lith. Not to make light of what happened with last year, Poa. Obviously, wish all the best for her and hope she's recovering well from that concussion she suffered against Ole Miss. But with Van Lith having to run the point once again, that, I think, really hurt LSU, because I think it's pretty easy to see Van Lith is not a true point guard. She is a scoring guard that primarily should be playing off ball. That should be her role, but she had to play point guard Sunday. And Raven Johnson and Fulwiley, they really made her feel their presence. They did not give her really any airspace, and I don't think Van Lith ever beat them off the dribble throughout the ball game. So credit to Fulwiley, not just for what she did on offense, but also on defense as well. And she gave them an offensive spark, especially early on in the game. The first quarter, she got put in the game, I believe, when South Carolina was down 13-7. She was responsible for 7 of the team's points, scoring 5 of them and assisting on another bucket before the end of the first quarter, and it just carried over from that point onward. And then real quickly, Tessa Johnson, she deserves a lot of props for the growth that she displayed in this tournament. Johnson does not get a lot of credit for what she does for this team. And I have to admit, I probably have not done a good enough job of propping her up. And admittedly, when people look at Tessa Johnson, they kind of view her as just sort of a three-point specialist on this team. But honestly, Tessa is not just a three-point shooter. Tessa's a very smart and savvy basketball player. I basically think she's a younger version of Tahina Paopao as a player. She does a lot of little things in terms of she's willing to be aggressive from the wing. Against Texas A&M, when Don said, I want y'all to be aggressive, Tessa Johnson led the charge in that regard in the second quarter. Got fouls, got to the free throw line. Great free throw shooter when she gets to the charity stripe. And she also plays good defense. She knows what she has to do. She does not take herself out of position very often. Tessa Johnson's going to be a really good player in this program. Give her another year or two, especially if she gets a little bit quicker defensively. She is going to be a solid two-way player, I think, for South Carolina at the two-guard spot. So for the Gamecocks to get this out of their freshmen in this kind of setting, that is a great sign for March, because obviously, unlike LSU, maybe LSU is the only team that can get away with this, but I still don't believe in today's age in basketball, you can get away with just relying on your starting 5 to take you all the way to a national championship. You've got to have a couple players off the bench that you can rely on both in the front court and the back court to help you get all the way to the Final Four and winning a national title. And if Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson play like this throughout the NCAA tournament, South Carolina's backcourt is in great shape. You got Raven, who has been there and done that at the point guard spot. Tahina, who was the best three-point shooter in the country at the shooting guard spot, also has a lot of experience. And then you got Fulwiley and Johnson. Johnson can play a little bit of the wing position at that 3 spot. And Fulwiley, I mean, she could do a little bit of everything, honestly. Just depends on what you want her to do. So it's great to see that from those two coming out of this weekend. Don Staley's got to be happy with that heading into the NCAA tournament. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope that y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show, as always. What are y'all's thoughts about the struggles that this team did endure in the SEC tournament, and how do you think it's going to make them better? What were your thoughts on the fight that took place against LSU on Sunday afternoon? And lastly, what were your thoughts on the performances from the freshmen on this team, MiLaysia Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson? Let me know your thoughts on all of that down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or you can shoot me a direct message on X at @ALion_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. As always, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Monday and a fantastic start to the work week. I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.